Welcome back. Aisha bint Abi Bakr was born in Mecca around 613 or 614 CE to Abu Bakr, one of the Prophet Muhammad's closest companions and a wealthy merchant, and Rumman, also an early convert to Islam. Growing up in late pre-Islamic Arabia, Aisha's childhood coincided with what's known as Islam's nascent phase, before it became a large imperial religion and when its doctrines, community and institutions were still emerging. There aren't many sources that provide details of her early years, but as the daughter of prominent Muslims, she must have been immersed in the faith from birth. This environment would have differed markedly from typical Arabian girls, who often married young for alliances or faced limited education. Aisha's elite family status and parental piety afforded her relative privilege. She learned orally from household discussions on revelations, ethics, and community challenges. There's strong evidence that early Islam encouraged and normalized the education of girls and women. The clearest evidence comes from Quranic emphasis on knowledge, prophetic statements that knowledge is obligatory for men and women, and reports that the Prophet set aside teaching time specifically for women at their request. The Quran repeatedly values knowledge and reflection, and a commonly cited hadith says seeking knowledge is obligatory on every Muslim, male and female, which later Muslim writers use as direct evidence that women were included in the duty to learn. Muslim history includes women among the literate and educated from the start of the community. Early records name 5 women who could write at the beginning of Islam, alongside only 17 men, suggesting that female literacy existed early and was socially visible. The same historical summaries say the Prophet encouraged women in his household, including his wives and daughters, to learn, and that women attended his public teaching sessions. So the evidence is not only that women were taught, but they also became teachers themselves. Women taught in mosques and homes and participated in the transmission of knowledge across generations. This matters because it shows education for women was not treated as merely private or exceptional. It produced recognized public authority. None of this means every Muslim society everywhere always lived up to the ideal, or that women everywhere enjoyed equal educational opportunities in later centuries. But for the earliest period, the sources consistently point in the same direction. Women were meant to learn, were taught, and were sometimes themselves major authorities in learning. So in early Islam, women had a role beyond that held by women outside the faith. They weren't just pawns to be used to cement family or political alliances. But they were that too. Aisha was briefly betrothed as a child to a non-Muslim from a rival clan, a common tribal pact that Abu Bakr later dissolved, prioritizing Islamic solidarity, and she was later married to Muhammad himself. This marriage exemplifies early Islamic social dynamics while provoking modern-day scrutiny, and we kind of have to address this. For about 25 years, Muhammad had been married to Aisha. She died in 619 CE, and after a year or so, a companion proposed some potential new wives. Muhammad approved 2. The widow Sauda bint Zam'a and Aisha, who had already been informally pledged to him by Abu Bakr. Now, traditional sources say Aisha was betrothed to Muhammad at around the age of 6 or 7 in Mecca, and that the marriage was consummated when she was around 9. To our 21st century minds, this sounds shocking, perhaps even inexcusable. But as ever in history, context is important. In 7th century Arabia, puberty marked adulthood, such as it was, not a calendar age. Betrothals were family pacts, often for protection or politics, and consummation waited until physical maturity. It's hard to imagine, but you also have to remember that the concept of childhood wasn't always a thing. It doesn't really become a mainstream idea in Europe and other industrializing societies until the late 19th century, with its modern form, what we would recognize now, fully cemented in the early 20th century. Early roots appear in the 17th and 18th centuries, but the idea only becomes broadly social and institutionalized once things like schooling, child welfare, and child-centered family life spread widely. Before then, what we regard now as children, with all that implies and entails in terms of rights and protections, were essentially just small adults. And this practice of promising girls as a form of collateral in a bargain between men certainly isn't unique to Islam. Byzantine Christians married girls at 12 years old. Persian nobles betrothed daughters at a very young age to build alliances. And Aisha's exact age at the time of her marriage is still debated. Some revisionists make a case to show that she was between 17 and 19 years old. Either way, the key isn't defending or condemning through today's lens. It's recognizing that Muhammad's other wives were mostly widows in their 30s or 40s. This wasn't a pattern of preference, but a unique bond that fueled Aisha's lifelong authority. Aisha stayed in her parents' home until 9, and sources describe her as playful yet sharp-witted, already engaging with the Prophet's teachings. She later spoke fondly of the marriage, calling it a blessing that let her learn directly from him up close. During Muhammad's lifetime, Aisha played a role as both a devoted wife and an active participant in the early Muslim community, leveraging her youth, her sharp intellect, and her close proximity to the client to contribute in ways that foreshadowed her later scholarly prominence. She served as a vital intermediary between Muhammad and female companions too shy to approach him directly, relaying questions on feminine matters like menstruation rulings, marital intimacy, and inheritance, issues sparsely detailed in the Quran but clarified through her narrations of his responses. Within the broader Medinan community, Aisha eliminated pre-Islamic habits by modeling Islamic ethics, advising women on faith, and sitting by her door during Muhammad's mosque teachings to absorb and later disseminate knowledge, already positioning her as a confidant and informal teacher, distinct from most women's domestic or supportive roles. At this point, we need to take a short digression into hadiths. Hadiths are concise reports capturing the sayings, actions, approvals, or silent consents of the Prophet Muhammad, serving as the primary record of his conduct. Each hadith comprises two essential components: the core component of the narration and a chain of transmitters tracing back to the Prophet himself, such as Aisha reported from Muhammad, "The best of you are those who are best to their wives." These reports, second in authority only to the Quran for Sunni Muslims, were initially preserved orally by companions during Muhammad's lifetime, as writing was limited and the priority was memorizing Quranic revelations. Over time, scholars developed a sophisticated science of authentication, grading hadiths as authentic, good, weak, or fabricated based on narrators' reliability, memory, and consistency. The development of hadiths as a formal corpus began earnestly only after Muhammad's death, amid rapid Islamic expansion and the risk of losing eyewitness accounts. Early caliphs like Abu Bakr and Umar encouraged memorization but hesitated on widespread writing to avoid confusing hadiths with the Quran or fabricating reports for political gain. By the 8th century, though, under Umayyad and Abbasid rule, systematic compilations surged. Hadiths gained profound significance because the Quran, while providing timeless principles like prayer and charity, often lacks specifics. Muhammad's example fills these gaps. They form the bedrock of Sharia, informing 80 to 90% of rulings on worship, family law, ethics, and governance. For instance, Aisha's over 2,000 narrations uniquely detail household practices other wives couldn't access due to her youth and proximity. As Islam globalized, hadiths protected rituals against local innovations. They fostered scholarly consensus and really empowered women like Aisha, transforming them from peripheral figures into architects of Islamic thought. After Muhammad died, Aisha emerged as a towering figure in the Muslim community, dedicating the nearly 5 decades until her own death in 678 CE to scholarship, teaching, and public influence, roles that solidify her as one of Islam's preeminent authorities. She narrated over 2,210 hadiths, more than any other companion, covering Muhammad's private life, prayer rituals, pilgrimage rules, inheritance laws, eschatology, and Quranic exegesis, which scholars praise for their precision and depth. These transmissions form a cornerstone of Sharia, with her input shaping up to a quarter of early rulings on family law and worship. From her home and the Prophet's mosque in Medina, she ran an informal madrasa, teaching mixed audiences of men and women on theology, poetry, medicine, genealogy, and Arabic literature, often correcting male companions and issuing fatwas, religious judgements, that caliphs like Umar consulted, establishing women as viable jurists in a male-dominated field. Aisha's post-Prophet legacy challenges stereotypes of passive Muslim women. She advocated for justice, promoted women's mosque attendance and Hajj rights against restrictive views, and modelled intellectual agency, mentoring generations and ensuring female perspectives embedded in Islamic orthodoxy. Her home became a hub for knowledge dissemination, as widowhood amplified rather than diminished her communal stature. Aisha still inspires Islamic feminists today. Scholars use her teaching in mosques to argue for women leading prayer, or her example as proof of early gender equality. Research shows how Aisha rejected weak traditions that limited women, encouraging modern reinterpretation. She's quoted in books, talks, and activism to challenge ideas of oppressed Muslim women. Schools and groups are named after her, and she helps in global talks on religion and gender. Aisha died in 678 CE, commonly thought to be around the age of 65, and was buried in Medina's al-Baqi cemetery. From a girl in Mecca to a key shaper of Islam, her work on hadiths, law, politics, and women's roles made her essential. Historians agree she preserved a third of the key hadith collections, influenced the Sunni-Shia divide, and proved women could lead. Sunni Muslims generally regard Aisha very highly. She is honoured as one of the mothers of the believers, respected as the Prophet Muhammad's wife, and widely valued as a major scholar and hadith transmitter. Sunni tradition also commonly treats her narrations as important sources for Islamic law and the Prophet's life. Shia Muslims generally view Aisha more with criticism, mainly because of her opposition to Ali and her role in early Islamic disputes, which Shia tradition sees as a grave political and religious error. They still recognize her as a historic figure and the Prophet Muhammad's wife, but they don't usually regard her as a reliable authority for hadiths in the way Sunnis usually do. Either way, she is a significant figure of influence in a religion that encompasses over 1 billion people. Next time, we stay in the same period and head even further east as we travel to China to look at a contemporary of Aisha's, Wu Zetian, the only woman in China's vast history to rule as emperor. But for now, thanks for joining me. Please remember to feed the algorithm and like, share and subscribe on your way out. And whatever you're up to, have a great day.